Hey everybody, what's up? It's John Garcia from KNOTFEST here. I am joined by Toschie, Norway's own hard rock vocalist, and Audrey Horne. My friend, how are you doing today? Welcome.
Thank you. I'm good. I'm good. I'm really good. And you?
I'm doing fantastic. Just the weather is enjoyable over here. It's spring, lots of good music coming out. So living the dream is all I can say, dude.
Living the dream.
Speaking of living the dream, we are recording this a little bit more than a week out of your guys' seventh album, Devil's Bell, coming out. Just real quick, how are you feeling now? At this stage, are you impatient, nervous, excited? What are you feeling with the album about ready to come out?
I'm very excited about it. We've been doing this for a long time, so you kind of get a bit what's the word? You kind of get a bit spoiled.
Mm.
We've been doing this, like I said, for 20 years now. This is our seventh studio album. It's our eighth album in total, and we we've always sort of been received really good. Of course, there's always someone who doesn't like our music, but that's of course there has to be someone who can't stand it. But in general, we've been received really, really well. So we're kind of old schoolers who just like, oh, we're releasing a new album. We're sort of expecting for it to be well received. And of course it might not be, but we're kind of spoiled in that way. I have to say that. So, but I'm excited about it. It's always good to sort of release something you have worked on for a long time and you put a lot of heart and energy into. So it's thrilling, of course.
Yeah, and I'd like to get into the nitty gritty of the album here in just a little bit. But I mean, we're talking about, hoping it's received really well. I feel like over the last couple of years, each time you guys drop an album, it gets like a little bit more as far as like attention to the band, a little bit more like eyes on it. Have you guys been feeling that as well? Because I feel like you guys have had a really strong run of albums the past several years. Do you feel that way as well?
Yeah, I think so too. And I think we're getting better at what we're doing, and we're still sort of hungry enough to sort of still be able to make albums that are sort of alive and kicking in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess yeah, I don't know. It's a lot of people say, hey, why aren't you bigger? You get so much like well received and there's so many people who like you. Why aren't your band bigger? And I usually say, well, that's of course it's got a lot to do with luck and being in the right place at the right time and all of that, but it's also a lot about what you do, because we've always been a band that sort of does this purely because we love to do it, and we haven't been on the road constantly like some bands that we've been. There are a lot of bands that we have taken out on tour that we've been touring with, that within 2 years we see that they play everywhere, no matter like what the venue or the occasion is. They'll just, if there's two people and a joint, they'll be there and they'll play. We kind of been sort of we're sort of people who we love to do this, so we always sort of kept it on a level where we don't get tired of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And also when five people who are pretty strong characters and have strong ideas and opinions about our music, you can easily sort of get into a huge fight and about things. So we've kind of kept things on a level where we enjoy doing it. And so I think a lot of the reason when people ask, why aren't you bigger? Well, there's many reasons for that, probably. But and there's no rule that says if a band makes proper good music that they will become a huge band. There's a lot of really, really great bands that never really gets the attention they deserve.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of it with us has to be with us, that we've kept things on a level where we feel that we enjoy what we do, and that it doesn't sort of get into where it just turns into a job, basically. Because if you tour and play like every venue, like all of us used to do that in bands, and we used, like earlier with Audrey Horne, we used to tour a lot where the tours didn't pay off, and you know, you had to sleep on the floor somewhere and stuff like that, and at one point you get tired of that. It's romantic, but it's, in the long run, it's really exhausting. So I think if we had toured 250 days a year, I think we would have been, of course, a lot bigger than what we are, but we don't. You know, we do a couple of tours every year, and try to keep it on a level where we enjoy it, basically.
And I think that that's so important with bands as well, because I mean, like, listening through your albums, you can tell that you guys are having fun. Like, that comes through in the songwriting, that comes through on the albums and in the songs. And it sounds to me like, you know, right, there's something to be said about bands doing just like whatever it is that they feel is right for them, right? That is so healthy. And it also sounds like for fans of the music, if you want Audrey Horne to be around for a little while, just like that, they give them there are a couple of months of touring or their shows, and then, you know, there's going to be new albums and stuff like that coming around.
Mm.
So speaking of the album, I did want to dig into this a little bit, because you guys, I believe you specifically, have talked to a couple of outlets talking about how this was, I guess, the first album that you guys did all in-house as far as like recording, mixing, mastering, all that stuff. Is that correct? Is this a fully homegrown album? Is that the first time that you guys have done that? And
Yeah.
What did you find with that process?
Well, it is the first. What we've done, our second album was almost done that way, with some exceptions, but this is sort of the first where we've done it like full on in-house. And I think to us it was not because we decided it's time to do that necessarily, because we've always preferred to work with an outside producer, because it's someone who sort of can, because a lot of times you have an idea and you just, you know, it's the rabbit hole, you go down it and you don't see it from a different angle. So it's always good to have an outside producer. And we usually work with producers who are not necessarily producers who works in this genre necessarily, you know.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them we work with pop producers and more indie producers and stuff like that. And that's always been because it's people, first of all, it's people we have a lot of respect for and who we truly admire their work. But it's also to sort of get a different angle, because it's healthy to have an outsider to come in and say, yeah, I know you guys find this amusing, but listen, what if you did this, you know? And then you have this epiphany and go like, shit, of course. But then again, this time we didn't, but that was not because, like I said, it was not because we decided it was time to do it this way. It was basically because of the pandemic, because it got so hard to work with outsiders, and it was kind of hard to write things together as well, because for a long period it was like you couldn't be with more than two people outside your own household.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then it was kind of like, okay, how do we do this, you know? And we decided, you know, you could always go like, yeah, fuck it, let's go into the rehearsal room, but then, you know, it's sort of when everyone sort of does this, and this is what the expert says, this is the way to sort of to get rid of this pandemic, then we were like, of course, then we have to sort of play ball and do the same thing. So we wrote a lot of the stuff separately and just sent files to each other, which is not the way we prefer to do things. But I think to us it was cool to do it, because it was like we've been doing a bunch of albums now where we've sort of gone into our rehearsing room, all five of us, write things together, rehearse and rehearse and rehearse, and then go into studio and record it pretty much as live as possible, and then do, of course, overdubs and re-record some stuff. But this time we sort of had to do it a completely different way, and right there and then it felt like something we had to do, something we were forced to do. But sort of after a while, we kind of realized that this is probably a good thing. You know, it gives you a different perspective on things, and it gave us more time to sort of work on, go right, like really deep into the songs, which I think was really good for us this time around. So it was. It was nice to do it like in house, and to be honest, when Alva, our one of the guitar players, came and said that, okay, it's going to be hard to work with outside producers, so what we're going to do is, like, I'm going to produce the album, and then Herman, who's the guy who makes it, he used to be our keyboard player back in the day. He said that I'm going to produce it and he's going to mix it, and the rest of us were like, I don't know about that, you know. But then he was like, okay, here's the deal, let's try it, and if it doesn't work out, we'll send it to someone, you know. We'll just record it and send it to someone who can sort of work on it. And we were like, yeah, okay, cool, let's do that. But it turned out that, you know, they both did a fucking great job, and it wasn't that we didn't trust them to do a good job. It was more that, you know, that, like I said, you know, we're going to be so self-centered and so focused on ourselves. Mm-hmm. So maybe it's not a good idea to do it that way. But it, you know, in hindsight, I think it was really the right thing to do. It was because I think they did a great job, and I think the album turned out really well. It's probably because, you know, when you're done recording and when the album is finished, you always spend some time listening to it. You know, 50% to sort of enjoy your own work, and 50% sort of check for fuck ups, basically, and go like, was that the right thing to do? Maybe we should have done it differently. So you do that every time you make an album, but this time is probably the time where I enjoyed listening to the album the most of all the albums we made, you know. So I'm truly happy with the way it turned out.
Yeah, and it's interesting to hear all different bands and like their experiences, whether they have had like written something right before the lockdown started or as they kind of had to go through it, like all of us did. And one of the things I've picked up from bands that have, you know, written and recorded through the isolation period or after the lockdown started is really having that time to kind of sit with the songs. And like so I've talked to a couple of bands who said that they grew as bandmates because they had more time to just actually talk to each other. They weren't in the road, like on the road in buses anymore or anything. Like they could really flesh that out. So you answered a couple of questions I had as far as, like, you know, how the process went, what you learned, everything like that. I'm curious if there were any surprises that came up that you don't think may have been on a previous album or in the process you guys hadn't done it the way that you just talked about you doing.
Yeah, in a way it was, because when we when we recorded it, I think the thing you said about how you could sort of dive more into it and spend more time doing it because there was much else to do, basically.
Right.
So, and sort of the thing that I noticed that was when we, well, not that I noticed, but we all noticed that, was because before we started writing it, because our plan was sort of we were on tour in Europe when the lockdown happened. So we just had to cancel the rest of the tour and just basically leave our stuff, because we were watching like the press conference on national TV in Norway, and they were like, yeah, we might close all the airports tomorrow, and like, because it was like doomsday and nobody knew what the fuck was happening.
Right.
So everyone was sort of panicking, and we were in Germany at the moment, and we were like, fuck, we need to go home, or we you know, we might be stuck here for we don't know how long, you know. So we were just like basically dropped everything, and of course, like a lot of people were back then, you know, you thought, well, this is going to be, you know, a couple of months of confusion and lockdown and stuff, and then things will, you know, work out, and we can go back on tour. So we just left everything, and we were like, you know, we can pick it up after the summer, but it's been there for over 2 years now, so but it's safe in Germany.
Well, at least you know that you can grab your gear whenever you go through Germany again. It'll just be waiting for you.
It'll be waiting for us. No, but the thing I said, when like normally when we our plan was to go finish that tour and then go home and then start writing stuff. And so before, you know, we start recording or writing for an album, we always talk about, not like we don't have like a sit down and a meeting with an agenda, but we sit down and talk about what do we want to do on the next album. And there's always like all kinds of crazy ideas, and then you start and you end up somewhere completely different than what you talked about. But on this album, you know, the thing we talked about was everyone was like, what do you want to do? And everyone said, I want to make a heavier album this time. I want to, you know, let's not go in all directions. Let's not, you know, fall for the temptation to sort of do like a AOR inspired song or like or whatever. So, but we also talked about what is our strength really, you know, as a band. What is it that we're good at, and we sort of felt that, well, when we play live, we have a tendency to, you know, like all the ballads and all the like slower stuff, we kind of like, yeah, let's not play that tonight, you know, let's play the stuff that rocks, you know. So we decided that that's what we enjoy doing, so let's make a heavier album. That's what we want to do when we play live anyway. And we also talk about, you know, the twin guitar thing and the sort of the melodic guitar parts that we had a lot of previously. We were like, maybe we should just like not put necessarily a guitar solo on everything. Let's focus more on the on doing things a bit more progressive in a sense. And so when we started writing the album and sort of had the songs almost finished, a lot of the songs weren't finished because we sort of you had the sort of the main parts. You had the verse and you had the chorus and you had a bridge and everything. But then you were like, well, what do we do after the second chorus? And so, yeah, there should be something more instrumental part there. And the cool thing about doing it this way was that when we recorded it, we ended up making something that is more progressive than what we've done earlier, or at least in a really, really long time, which was kind of cool because that was not the plan. The plan was sort of to make like, let's make a heavy album. Let's just straight hard rock. Let's not fuss about. Let's just make kick-ass songs that sort of starts and then finishes, and no ifs, ands, or buts, just go, you know. And that was, you know, when the album was finished, I was kind of like, I enjoyed so much the more instrumental parts. And we also have an instrumental song on that album, which was also the two guitar players. That was when the sort of the restrictions were lifted a bit here in Norway. They got together in the studio and were just jamming on that thing. And they sent me a video where they were playing some parts of that song, and they sent it to me. And I listened to it and was like, hey, this is cool, you know. And they wrote me back, yeah, maybe you could come up with some cool vocal ideas on it. If you don't, maybe we can just pursue it as an instrumental piece. And I just listened to it and I was like, dude, I don't want to make vocals for this. This should be an instrumental thing, because what you've done so far is sounds so good, and I don't want to fuck that up with my stupid singing, you know. So so I never actually tried to write anything on it, and that was also something that sort of came as a surprise, because we never done an instrumental song before. We never seen ourselves as a band that puts an instrumental song on an album. It's always been, we always sort of enjoyed a lot of instrumental songs, but we always figured that to us that we might be a bit boring as an instrumental band, but it turned out it fitted so good in on the album.
Yeah, and I love that you guys are 20 years into your career and still trying new stuff, trying things. You know, you said progressively. Like, I would never call Audrey Horne really a progressive band, right? But like to hear you guys going in that direction, because I think that's really inspiring.
Yeah, I think so too, and I think that's sort of what we talked about. That we sort of have this. What I talked about earlier, where we keep this on the level where we enjoy it, is sort of where we go. Every album we make, we don't sort of have to make an album that sells a lot, because if the album doesn't sell, is not commercially a success, then it's not the death for us, you know. So like every album, and I'm not saying that we're very special in that sense, but like every album, we sort of feel that we always talk about, we have to make an album that sort of is 100% there. It, you know, we cannot afford to make an album that we will look back on and say, yeah, that wasn't as good. When you think about, I'm not talking shit about anyone, but when you talk about bands like Motley Crue, you know, like today you would say Theater of Pain is, yeah, it's a cool album. It's got some great songs, but that was clearly an album where they weren't focused. They were just like, yeah, we just need to put out an album, you know. They were focused on drugs back then, but sort of that, my point is that we have, every album has to count 100%, and because, you know, this band doesn't make us rich. So this is sort of our legacy in a way. You know, you have to be able to look back at it and say, fuck, I'm proud of that album. So that is sort of our goal on every album. And I guess most bands have that goal, you know, but so I'm not saying that's special for us, but I'm just saying that it's fucking important to us.
Yeah, 100%. You want to be honest and genuine. You want to do something that you guys are proud of, which actually is a very good segue into my next question, which is just about, you know, your guys' sound and what you've developed over the past years, because you guys are very, very good at taking, you know, your obvious influences from the 70s and the 80s and putting a nice modern twist on them, so that it doesn't just sound like a retread or a rehashing, but it's still, you get that like beating in your chest that you want to just like throw your fists up and be in a packed room with a bunch of sweaty people and, you know, singing along. Like, where do you guys find that balance as far as like the influences versus being completely yourself in, you know, 2022, 2021, 2018, whatever it is? And where do you find that balance, and what do you think is, in your opinion, the key to Audrey Horne's songwriting?
Well, the balance, I have no clue, basically, because I talked to a lot of journalists about this over the years, because Audrey Horne is sort of the band that everyone says, yeah, you know, you can clearly hear our influences. And I think it has a lot to do with that our influences are bands that has such a unique sound. Like a lot of people sort of say that they draw the Iron Maiden comparison to us, and of course Iron Maiden has a very distinct, unique sound. So as soon as you sort of walk into that territory, then it's going to be obvious, you know. The same way when people sort of go into the AC/DC territory, then they're labeled sort of AC/DC-ish right away, you know. But I think we just write music, and you know, we have so much love for the bands that we grew up with and the bands that we, you know, still listen to this day. So of course we get inspired by that, and and that rubs off on our music as well. But we never really sort of sat down and said that, okay, we need to do something to make it less Iron Maidenish or whatever it is. Was it just always just because of course we notice ourselves, you know, this has a very strong Iron Maiden vibe, but then we always just like keep writing, and we know that in the end it's going to sound like an Audrey Horne song. It's not going to sound like an Iron Maiden song. It's just going to have a lot of clear influences from Iron Maiden, but so I'm not quite sure if I could tell you how we balance it. It's just a natural process, really. And as for your second question was, sorry.
What do you think the key to the songwriting is, in your opinion? Like, what's the straw that stirs the drink, I guess, that makes Audrey Horne Audrey Horne?
I think it has a lot to do with the fact that we've always been focused on melodies. We've sort of always been more, we've always been more the Beatles than the Stones, to put it that way. We've always, where Stones is a lot of like guitar riffs and rhythm, and the Beatles were always like very much more melody focused. And I think that's also with us, because we've always had like our two guitar players, they always, you know, say that if they have like a really, really cool guitar riff, if I don't come up with something great on top of that, then they're like, okay, then the riff is basically useless, you know. Then so we've thrown away stuff that I guess some bands would have kept because it sounds so good. So okay, let's, you know, the vocal is not that important in a sense, you know, as long as the riff is really good. So always been very focused on melody, and also the fact that, you know, some of the band members are from more way heavier bands, you know, and I'm not. You know, my background as a musician is more. I was before Audrey Horne. I used to play in some more heavy bands for a little while, but mainly my background is more from bands that were inspired by like the power pop and noise stuff. Like I've been in bands that were more inspired by Bob Mould, Sugar, Work Assault, that kind of thing, and so Swerve Driver, that kind of band. So I've always been sort of the pop guy in the band, and I think the combination of me being very, very pop focused in my vocal, and especially the guitar players being very like heavy metal focused in their guitar playing, makes for a combination that somehow works well, we think, at least. But I think that's the combination there is sort of the straw that stirs the drink, to put it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, and when you're saying that, you guys, we don't know how we balance it, we just kind of do. Like, I realize it's like asking an artist, well, like, how exactly do you paint this on this camp? Like, there's not really an answer there. But I was curious because, like, I think of you guys almost like a Rorschach test, right? Whoever is listening to your band is going to pick out the influences that they hear, right? Whether it's Deep Purple or Uriah Heep, Scorpions, or like I hear a lot of Thin Lizzy in there because I love Thin Lizzy, and it sounds like you guys do too, right? So like when you say that, right, it's I think that you mentioned how you guys love the music, and this is something that I brought up earlier as far as like you can tell that that's in there because like it doesn't sound like, okay, we're gonna do a Thin Lizzy riff right here and then a Scorpions riff right here and do that. It's just like we're putting everything in, and you'll just leave it up to the listener to kind of like pull out whatever it is that they hear or they feel, because we're all on our different journeys and all have our different experiences, right? And some bands that I listen to you might not listen to and very much around, but I think that's one of the strengths of this band is being that you can pick out the stuff that you can hear, but it doesn't sound like we're just throwing that in there because we do it. Like there is Audrey Horne in there. Like to make it like a chef's comparison, right? Two different chefs might use the same ingredients to make the same thing, but they might be two different dishes because of the personality of the person and the creative making it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I remember when we recorded our fourth album called Youngblood. When we did that, we sort of, because that was sort of a bit of a turning point in our career, because that was sort of when we definitely decided that, because everything before that was sort of career writing focus, you had to be at the right place, you had to be in contact with the right people, you had to make albums that sort of had an impact on, I don't know, but after our third album, we sort of realized that we need to bring the fun back into this, and we just said, well, how do we do that? Well, let's go back to the starting point. When you start a band, you're in a rehearsing room and you just have fun and write stuff that's fun to play, and don't think too much about, is this like a good career move? Is this going to be received in that way or that way? And when we did that, it automatically became a lot more classic hard rock influenced. And when we were in studio recording that was sort of the only time where we sat down and said, is this too much? And I remember the guy who was engineering it, he said to us, like, fuck, I love that you're doing this, that you're going like all the way on the classic hard rock thing. And he said, it's a commercial suicide what you're doing right now, but it's cool. And we were like, is it a commercial suicide? And it was like, yeah, it is. Come on, you're basically going from sort of being a bit more mysterious band to sort of being just like straightforward hard rock band, which there are quite enough of in this world, he said. And we were like, well, maybe we haven't thought about it that way, but so we talked to a producer and we were like, is this too much? Are we sort of overdoing this thing? Are we having too much fun? And he said that, what, it's not, because we asked him, do you think that like the references are too obvious on this album? And he said, they are very obvious, but he said, but it's sort of done very, you can hear that it's done honestly, he said. You can hear that you're doing this because you fucking love this kind of stuff. And he said, he said that whatever, whenever an artist sort of dives into something in the history of music, he said you could sort of, you could almost steal whatever you want, he said, but you have to have one element that is honest and that is strong. And he used Amy Winehouse as an example. He said, take Amy Winehouse. What she does or what she did musically, he said, was basically just doing something that had been done by artists before her.
Mm-hmm.
But she had something that was honest enough,
Mm-hmm.
that made it credible, that made people believe in it. And I think in a way that's what we have as well, because everyone who sort of gives us feedback on our music and our live shows, especially, comes up and says that they said that this is just so fucking fun.
Yeah.
And it's because you're sort of comedians up there, or doing the Steel Panther thing or anything. It's just pure, honest fun, because we can tell that you love doing this, and it rubs off on us as an audience. And I think sort of that's when he said that, we kind of realized that let's not think too much about this. Let's just do it, because as long as we do it and keep it honest, then hopefully that'll be enough, you know. Because I think that Amy Winehouse example was so, I sort of immediately understood what he said. And when, you know, when we release an album, I can pick up a magazine and it takes me like 2 seconds to spot the Audrey Horne review, because it's the review where there's listed tons of other bands. And there's always like blah, 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 Scorpion, blah, 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 Ozzy Osbourne, blah, 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 Iron Maiden, blah, 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 Helix, blah, blah, blah. It's like a bunch of other bands, Thin Lizzy, blah, blah, blah. So if you look for the column with a bunch of names, like other band names, then that's us basically. And it's understandable, because it's so easy to sort of explain our music in a way. It's kind of like I do normally, and you probably do as well. If you hear a band and you're going to explain this to someone else, and he hasn't heard or she hasn't heard about this band, I have no idea what it is, the first thing you would say is that it's kind of like, you know, Tool meets blah blah blah, and then they would go like, oh, okay, cool, yeah, that sounds interesting, I'll give that a listen. But if you say, well, it's a bit mysterious, it's a bit, you know, it's a bit groovy and blah blah, then you'll be like, okay, it doesn't tell me anything really about the music, you know. But as soon as you name drop something, people have sort of I don't know the English word, where you like, you know, where you put your jacket, or
something to hang their hat on,
yeah.
right? Like a reference, I guess. I had something, then as soon as you said it, I was like, well, I don't know English either.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, we do this all the time as well. And I also love it when it's like, well, this band is like this band, but filtered through this band with like a side of, right? You just like, you have those bands where you have those touch points, like you said, to give someone an idea. I just did this the other day. There is a Swedish band that we've been listening to, and I was like, well, they sound like a mix between Royal Thunder and Oceans of Slumber, right? Two bands in their own right that don't really sound anything alike, but they have similarities there, and you're able to like point that in. Say that again?
What's the name of that band?
Bestful Jansson. They're from Sweden. They have their second album. They're relatively new. They have an album coming out in May. Really, really good. Like stoner rock meets like psychedelia, like stoner doomish kind of. It's really, really fucking good.
Cool.
So getting ready to wrap up. I'm sure that we could probably be going on for like hours and hours and hours about our different types of favorite music and everything like that. But the album is coming out in a little bit less than a week. Most people are probably going to be watching this after it comes out. That's usually the way time works, right? We have more time after the date has passed than before. What do you hope people take away from this album?
I sincerely hope that that the music is something that, I don't know. I hope they listen to the music and say, "Fuck, I want to see this band live."
Yeah.
Because it's sort of, that's where we always sort of been at our best, is as a live band. It's always been, you know, there's always, every now and then you meet someone who's been to our show and, you know, not necessarily been a huge fan, you know, if we've sort of been, because we've done, you know, tours as a support or special guests for other bands. And there's always at these shows, there's always someone coming up and says that, I've heard your band before, I listened to one of your albums, and I thought it was cool, but damn, live you were a completely different band, but this was so much better, which is it's sort of the whole point, in a way, is that because these days, earlier bands made an album and then they went on tour to support that album. Today bands make an album to support the tour they're going on, because that's where the money is these days, with the streaming and downloading, and the death of album sales, basically, even though it's getting better, I've heard. But to us, that's kind of like, there are two completely different things, an album and a live situation. But when you make an album, you sort of, that when you go out and play it live, that's where it really gets refined in a way, because there's always elements from the album that you're not able to do live, or you're not interested in doing live, or whatever. But the songs always sort of, like, every time we make an album, after one tour, the songs, I start to sing them a bit different, and they start to play them a little bit different, and you sort of fine tune things. And so I hope people listen to this album and and it makes them want to see us live. And also, of course, I hope people think the songs are good, basically.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, that's sort of a main focus, not to write cool riffs and have some cool lines to sing on top of that. We've always sort of put a lot of pride into creating songwriting, basically.
Yeah, and I think that the two singles that you guys have released so far, Dance Macabre and Devil's Bell, are a nice appetizer for that. I mean, I'm already looking forward to it from hearing those two albums. Like, when Dance Macabre came out, dude, that song is still stuck in my head. It's been out for, what, like a month or two? So, like, we're ready. Will we get a chance to see you guys live? I know you guys have a couple of shows on the palette for the summer, but will you be doing any touring after this album is released?
We will, but we were planning to start touring in a month or something, but that had to be postponed because there's so much uncertainty still. There's
right.
Especially financially within touring. So we sort of had to, after a lot of discussion with booking agents and management and everything, like, everyone said that don't do it right now, just wait a bit. So we were like, okay, of course we wanted to go out and play, but we were like, okay, let's not what we want, but let's wait. So we're still in the middle of planning and booking the tour for after the summer. So I don't have sort of the dates and the venues or anything yet, but hopefully soon.
Just as long as you know that it's coming, that is enough for us. We all have shows that we want to get to, and after being inside for so long and everything like that, if it's on the horizon, say no more. We'll just wait for the announcement to come. The last note that I have to leave you on, you had that amazing anecdote about recording Youngblood, and that being the kind of crux, the turning point for you guys as a band. That's the album that I discovered you guys on. So, like, here you go. Cool. 10 years later, there you go. If not for that album, we wouldn't be here talking today. So I'm so stoked that you guys are doing exactly what it is that you guys want to do. Everybody, Devil's Bell by Audrey Horne is out on April 22nd via Napalm Records. Go pick it up. Toschie, it has been amazing talking with you today, my friend. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to chat, and congrats on the album, my friend.
Thank you, bro. It was a pleasure talking to you, and stay classy and stay healthy and stay sexy and see you somewhere around.
Yeah, you do the same. If you guys ever make it to the U.S., I will be there in bells on. You won't know me because I'll be running around the top of the crowd, just like on everybody's heads.
I'll listen. I'll keep my ears to the ground for the sound of bells.
Yeah, awesome.